Welcome class to your Chapter 2 lecture video, Variables and Simple Data Types. In Chapter 2 we're going to cover 4 objectives, and they are variables, strings, numbers, and comments. So let's look at the very first thing in our chapter, and that is what really happens when you run hello_world. So as noted in Chapter 1, all Python files must end in .py. This is going to indicate to our editor that this is a Python file, and it will then execute the Python interpreter. It also does the highlighting of your code with different colors, and again that depends on the color scheme that you'll be using. And this is called syntax highlighting. Variables. Variables hold a value. You can change the value of a variable at any time. The value of the variable could be a string, which would be noted in either single or double quotation marks. You could have a numeric value, and that wouldn't have quotation marks around it, or you could have a variable assigned to another variable. So let's go ahead and modify hello world. And so this is where I left off with hello world at the end of Chapter 1 for your 1-2 lab. So let's go ahead and modify to page 16. So we're going to assign our print to a variable, and that variable is going to be called message. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut it and paste it in there, and then what I would do is now print my variable. So I'm going to go ahead and temporarily take these out and then go ahead and run the program, and I get the same output that I did in Chapter 1. So again, you can change this to whatever value it needs to be. I could use single quotes around it, and that would work as well. If I needed it to be numeric, I could put the number 5, and it would print out 5. Okay, so I could even assign another variable to another variable. So how do we name our variables? Variables can contain only letters, numbers, and underscores. Start with a letter or underscore. Spaces are not allowed in our variable names. Do not use Python keywords. So for example, to this point, a Python keyword to you would be print. So P-R-I-N-T. You would never use that as a variable name. Should be short and descriptive. And descriptive, I always use the word as functional. So if it is first name, name it first underscore name. So make it functional so that when you look at it, you actually know what the contents of that variable should contain. Recommended that variables should also be in undercase or lowercase. Avoiding name errors when using variables. So this example right here is to show you that if you don't type the variable the same way, you're going to get a traceback error. So let's go ahead and try that in our example. And I'll just bring it back to Hello Python World. And let's take one S out. So this is going to happen to you. You're going to have traceback errors, and don't worry about them. You will learn through them, but we want to learn about what they say to us. So this one says name error, name message, M-E-S-A-G-E, is not defined. Okay, so that's a flag that, hey, we didn't type it the same way because it's not defined. If I would have typed it up here as M-E-S-A-G-E, they would match and everything would be fine. It doesn't, know how we spell things, but it does know if things match. Okay, so traceback error. And again, I just want to look at it one more time. It says traceback. It gives you the file name. It gives you the line number. And then it even gives you the error, the line that the error is on. Okay, so name message is not defined. Now you're going to find that in the Genie editor, you're going to have this same type of traceback errors are going to be given to you. Strings. Before we go on to strings, let's look at our lab for 2-2. Okay, so 2-2 is called simple messages, and we're going to store a simple message in a variable and then print that message. And then you need to change the value of the variable to a new message and then reprint the new message. So you're going to have two print statements and you're going to have two assignments to a variable. And this is on page 19. So let's go ahead and look at strings now. Strings are a series of characters, anything inside a single or double quotations. So in the first example here, this is a string, period, is inside double quotation marks. And then this one, this is also a string, is inside of single quotation marks. And those are pretty straightforward. The problem lies is when we start to nest quotes inside of our strings. So this one, I told my friend, Python is my favorite language, and the quote is in the double quotation marks. In order to use the double quotation marks, I need to make sure that I enclose the entire string in single quotation marks. So I'm going to demonstrate through Hello World why this would be. Okay, so let's go ahead and use one of these. Let's just use the one that I just looked at. Okay, so I told you can probably see through the editor in the syntax highlighting that things have gone wrong already. Okay, so this is just to demonstrate to you that if I use double quotes around my entire string, but then my quote has the double quotes, Python gets a little confused. Okay, the editor gets a little confused. Let me go ahead and bring this back here. So I'm going to go ahead and run it. I just want to see what it comes up with. And it says syntax error. It's telling me hello world, line 3. And it actually points exactly to where things start to go wrong. So invalid syntax. So again, the rule is when you use double quotation marks around your quote inside, you need to enclose with single quotation marks. Now once I do that, you can see the syntax highlighting is now correct. Okay, and that's kind of a flag to me that it's going to work. Now if we do the opposite, where we change this back to double quotes, I can also do, to fix it, to do single quotes in the inside. And sometimes your editor will pair things, so you have to be really careful there. Okay, so that works as well. Now here's the reason why it had a problem with the double quotes or the same type of quotes within the string itself. It sees this as the beginning and it sees this as the end of the string. And that's why everything beyond it is not color coded correctly. Okay, so just make sure that you, whatever you close them in, the entire string is, you're using the opposite inside. Now there's one exception, and that has to do with an apostrophe. Okay, and we'll look at that here in a second. But here's two more examples. Double quotation marks, singles inside, and then here double, but we only have this one single. Okay, so let me see here if I need to go ahead and look at, I'm actually going to look at that apostrophe example. I don't know, I'll just keep it in the order of the chapter. Okay, let's go ahead and look at changing case in a string with methods. So this one leads us to a new example, and it's called name. Okay, and here it is. We have a variable called name, and it assigned a string of Ada space Lovelace. So there are methods that we can attach to variables, or even strings for that matter, and they will change what we're going to print out, for example. So this is going to print out in title case. Title case means that the first character of each word is going to be uppercased. So let me go ahead and run this one, and now I get Ada with a capital A and a capital L. Now we further go on and we have upper and we have lower as well. So we can convert it to all uppercase or all lowercase. So let's go ahead and add that in here. Okay, and we're going to actually change the value of the variable to be title case, just to demonstrate that the lowercase actually works. Okay, so name dot upper, two parens, and then name dot lower two parens. So upper is going to, of course, go to all uppercase and then lower. Okay, so here is our output. Now the reason that we change the value is because if we had it here continually as a lowercase, we really wouldn't see the results of lower because it's already lowercase. So again, you can change the value of a variable at any time that you need to. Okay, so use the title case, upper and lowercase, to format your output throughout this entire semester. Okay, and we'll work on some other tips as well. Let's look at the next concept, which is f-strings. Okay, f-strings are important for us to use, and they are required in this course to use. Older versions of Python use the concatenation symbol, which was the plus sign, and other languages use that as well. But f-strings came along 3.6 or 3.7 and later, and so we need to be using them. Okay, they make it really convenient once you learn how they're used. So let's go ahead and modify or create a new file called full name, and we have first underscore name equal Ada, last name Lovelace, and then we create a new variable where we kind of push the two together. We concatenate them together. Concatenate is a fancy word that we use in programming that means that we've just kind of appended things together. So here is the syntax of an f string. You would need to say f, and then you would do quotes. So quotes like that. And then you start to develop what you want inside that string. So when you're using a variable, you have to use curly braces right above your enter key, okay? And then when I type in first name, and then I will close it out, and then I want a space between the two, and then I want to use last name as well, so I'll use last name. Okay, and then I'm just going to print out the results of the full name. Okay, so that's what it looks like. Now, if I wanted to add further on here and say title, I could do that, because now I have uppercase A and uppercase L. Okay, let's modify further by putting some text around our message. Okay, so we can modify and use multiple f strings. So again, once you use an f string, you have to have double quotes. So here's the opening quote. So now I'm going to move right before the close of the print and put the other one. And now I need to figure out what I need to do in here, right? So we're going to do hello, comma, and then we're going to put curly braces around the variable. Now, if you're adding a method such as title, upper or lower, that curly brace is going to follow that method. Okay, and then we're going to put an exclamation point in here right before the quotation. So now it says hello, comma, space, Ada Lovelace. Okay, and these are all demonstrated on page 21. Okay, we can further even add a variable that would hold this information and then print out that variable. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move this to a variable, and that variable is going to be message. We'll take that print, and then we'll just go ahead and print message. Okay, and we get the same results. Okay, so it's going to take some practice as to when you're going to use variables to store output and when not to use them. Okay, and most of the time you're going to use variables to store the output because it's easier to read a print statement when it just says what it says on line 7, when it says print and then the variable name, versus what it said before with the whole f string inside the print. Also, the purpose of variables too is that it's easier to modify. We go to the variable, we change it, and then it goes ahead and updates wherever the output is being used. Okay, now let's go ahead and practice using some tabs and new lines, and we're going to do that inside of our command prompt. So in programming, white space is any non-printing character, spaces, tabs, and end-of-line symbols. So we use white space to organize our output for easier reading. And I'm going to require this of our labs so that they're easy to read. So the output's not all pushed to the left side. You know, it's hard to read when everything is pushed to one margin. So \t, okay, so falling \t, this is going to tab in Python. And then we have some new lines. So \n is like hitting enter when you're typing in a word in like Microsoft Word. So let's go ahead and practice these in our command prompt. And all we have to do is type Python here. Okay, so these are on page 22. So print Python. Okay, so that prints out Python. Now, to get your command that you just entered, all you have to do is do the up arrow. And then you can come in here and you can add in like you would in an editor. So I'll go ahead and enter, and now it's tabbed in. And that tab looks large in the command prompt, okay? And it will, okay? But that's okay. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to build another print. And that is languages. Okay, so we have languages, then we have a new line. Okay, Python, new line, C, new line, JavaScript. Okay, I can further, modify this by going new line, then tab, new line, tab, oop, yep, and new line, tab. Okay, now they are indented. Okay, so use the tabs and the new lines, again, to structure your output, please. Stripping white space. So Python can look for extra white space on the right and left sides of a string. Typically, we get our data from our users. And data that comes from our users can have errors in it. And the user could have put some extra spaces at the end of the input that they're giving us, or even at the beginning. So we can use these methods to go ahead and strip that data down to what we call kind of clean data. So if you want the value of the variable updated, after stripping white space, you must assign the value back to the variable. So let's practice this on page 23. Okay, again, using the command prompt. So we create a variable, and the variable is called favorite_language. We're going to assign that language to be Python. And again, you can use double quotes. Okay, they're just showing single quotes here. If I look at favorite language, so if I just type the variable name and hit enter, it tells me what the value is. Okay, so now I'm going to do favorite language, and I'm going to do rstrip, which was going to strip the white space. Okay, oh, I forgot to put space in there. Let's go ahead and back this up. So we'll put space in there. Now we'll look at favorite language, and we'll see that there's a space at the end. Okay, so now let's do the rstrip, favorite language.rstrip, which would take that space off, right? Okay, so there it is, space is removed. Now let's look at favorite language again, and we see, oh, the space is back. Okay, so again, looking at what I stated here, if you want the value of the variable updated, after stripping this white space off, for example, rstrip, you must assign the value back to the variable. So it's not a permanent update to the variable. We have to actually make it an update. So to do this, I get to my rstrip. There we go. And then I would type favorite language in front of it with an equal sign. So I assign it back. Now if I look at favorite language, I see that the space is now gone. Okay, so again, to demonstrate that you need to reassign it back to the variable. Okay, continue to practice those on page 23. Okay, now let's look at the next section with regards to apostrophes. So avoiding syntax errors, I've kind of alluded to this already when we talked about strings, but Python doesn't recognize a section of your program as valid as a syntax error. Okay, so this one is going to error because maybe, let's try it. Okay, so message let's look at this message, and let's do the single quotes. Okay. So do we have a problem? Yes, we have a problem because that rule, what you use to enclose the string, you can't use inside. So two solutions: double quotes to enclose the entire string, okay, or leave it as single quotes and backslash, okay, and this is called escaping a character, backslash the single quote, and then it works. Okay, you can backslash double quotes, you can backslash backslash. So if you want to learn more about Python escape characters, go ahead and do a Google search on that. And let's actually try that. I love to teach students how to Google. So Python escape characters. It's almost like it knew what I wanted. It's kind of scary. But anyway, w3schools.com is always a great resource to go to. And here we have all of the ones that we can escape. And you can even practice them and try them here. So here's a single quote, backslash. We already talked about new line and tab. And there's probably a few more that aren't listed here. Okay, before we jump into the next section, let's go ahead and look at our other labs. Okay, so you're going to do 2-4, which is name cases. Store a person's name in a variable. Maybe it's your own name. And then print that person's name in lowercase, uppercase, and title case. Okay, and then 2-6 is going to build off 2-5. So we'll look at 2-5 first. Find a quote from a famous person you admire. Print the quote in the name of its author. Your output should look something like the following. Include the quotation marks. So F strings, okay, maybe are going to come into play in this 2-6. But here we go. Albert Einstein once said, so you put single quote here when you're using the print. Then we're going to modify in 2-6. But this time store the famous person's name in a variable called famous person. So Albert Einstein would be stored in famous person. Then your message, okay, is stored in a new variable called message. Okay, or you can call it quote. Okay, and then print everything out. So two variables are going to be used here in 2-6, and then use an F string to go ahead and bring those two variables to your print statement output. Okay, I am going to remove the lab 2-7. This one takes quite a bit to go through. And so I'm going to remove that as far as our lab assignment is. Okay, so just 2-4 and 2-6 there. Let's go ahead and look at numbers next. So numbers are pretty straightforward. Whole number, okay, we can have a float. Okay, so an integer is considered the whole number, a number that is not a fraction, okay, doesn't have any decimal places. We can add, subtract, multiply, and divide. We can raise them to their powers with exponents. You can use spaces in expressions or not. So I could say 2 to the second power. So let's do that over here. So if I go 2 to the second power, okay, I get 4. I could also say 2 raised to the second power with spaces, and it would be the same. Okay, you can use parentheses for order of operations as well. Okay, and that will modify, of course, the order of how things are operated on. Floats are numbers with a decimal place. Okay, Python defaults to a float, the result in any operation that uses a float, even if the output is a whole number. So, for example, on page 27, 4 divided by 2. So 4 divided by 2 brings in 2.0. Okay, now you can use these two methods. Okay, 4 divided by 2 with integer around it, then you would get no decimal place. You can also do 4 2 division symbols, and you will get no decimal places. So make sure that you use that for your lab. You can practice everything that is on page 26 and 27. Okay. Those are good practice examples. Underscores and numbers. So where we would typically put a comma in a number is where we can note and with an underscore. You can code it here just like it is, but that kind of looks confusing. And sometimes it's hard to, say, well, how many, what is this number? Well, here it's easier to say, right? Because we know that this is a comma and this is a comma and this is a comma, okay? So this would be 14 billion. Multiple assignment, so if you want to assign the same thing or even different numbers to multiple variables, you can do this syntax. So x, y, and z are going to be 0, 0, 0. I could say x, y, z, 0 to 4, and 2 would be assigned to y, and 4 would be assigned to z. Constants are variables. Okay, it's really not a variable because a variable means that it can change. So it's a constant and that it does not change. We note them with uppercase. So max underscore connections equal 5,000 is an example of a constant. Another example would be pi, the 3.14. And there's other things that do not change, okay? And you would note those again in uppercase. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at our last lab. This one's pretty straightforward. Okay, so number 8, it is straightforward. So write addition, subtraction, multiplication, division operations that each result in the number 8. Be sure to enclose your operations in print statements to see the results. So here's an example of addition. Now remember with the division, I don't want to see a decimal place, so you're going to use either integer or those two division symbols. Now if you want to change it to something else than 8, it doesn't bother me. I don't care if they equal different numbers. I just want to see you demonstrate addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Comments. These are notes within your programs, and they explain what your code is supposed to do and how you're making it work. Maybe where you left off in your coding, make them meaningful. You are required to have 2 code comments per file. So for example, right here, I could say makes the first letter of each word uppercase. Okay, prints all words in upper. Okay, so a minimum of 2. Okay, full name here, I could say using fstring to build full name. Okay, they're going to be pretty simple here with chapters 1 and 2. Okay, and then they will get more complex as we get into more complex concepts. But again, a minimum of 2 plus your name and date at the top are required. You can make a note to yourself, hey, I left off here, before you go ahead and exit out of your editor. And then the last thing is what is called the Zen of Python. And if you type import this, okay, so import this, you will see the Zen of Python. And it's by Tim Peters. And it's just some things that they say about Python. And I'll just point out a couple of them. Okay, simple is better than complex. But complex is better than complicated. Okay, readability counts. Okay, that's huge. Make your programs readable. And then here, don't procrastinate. Now is better than never. Okay, so if you have any questions with regards to your labs, and so I'm going to jump back here to your assignments. And again, I'm going to remove the 2-7. Okay, so it's just going to be 2-2, 2-4, 2-6, and 2-8 for this chapter, and then the quiz. If you have any questions, all you need to do is contact me. I know that this is an 8-week course, and so things move a little faster. So by all means, please keep me in the loop of what's going on, okay? Thank you.